Right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rosemary Riel. I'm the Assistant Director for Academic Service Learning with SOURCE. That's Johns Hopkins University Center for Community Engagement and Service Learning. Thank you for joining us via Zoom today. Today, we will be having our SOURCE partner panel, and today's focus will be on gender, health equity, and justice in Baltimore. Before we begin, I'd like to share a brief acknowledgement that we respectfully acknowledge and give thanks to the Piscataway tribe, including the Piscataway Conroy tribe of Maryland and the Cedarville Band of Piscataway, the indigenous people who are the traditional owners of the land and of the Chesapeake Bay region. We also acknowledge all indigenous people as the traditional owners of the lands and the waters of the United States. All of this is to acknowledge the impact of racism and systemic oppression, including the practice of redlining, colonization, genocide, and state-sanctioned violence on the lives of Black and Brown folks. And so with that, again, welcome. Just a little bit about SOURCE and our values. Today's partner panels, we're really beginning to continue a shift to focus on highlight our core values of reciprocity, justice, service, and collaboration. And so if all of the folks in our Zoom room could take a moment to type into the chat a little bit about yourself, your name, your pronouns, and maybe one word that expresses how you're feeling entering our virtual space today. And just a word about your participation today. And again, my name is Rosemary Riel, she and her pronouns, and I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling very activated that we have our representatives. So if folks in the room could just take a moment, and that'll really, I'd love to, that's just a first way to get to know who's gathering together and who we can invite into the conversation. So thanks all for taking a moment to do that. And I'll continue a little bit more further with our invitation and introductions. So this slide here really highlights the Johns Hopkins principles of community engagement. SOURCE has been a leader in trying to move forward with some principles of how we partner with organizations throughout Baltimore and throughout our community to really have a streamlined process of how we build our partnerships and how we strengthen community. And these are our 5 steps that we are now intentionally integrating into our work. I mean, a lot of the work that we've done, these have been guiding principles sort of informally, but these are really, we are on the move to a shift to more intentional principles of shared vision and values, mutuality and respect, transparency and communication, shared decision-making and commitment. And so with these principles, we're also highlighting our social justice commitments. So in 2017, our office went through a very robust year-long task force and strategic planning process that came out with a strategic plan for 2018 to 2020. And out of that, really, these social justice commitments were a focus of our, really the spirit of that. And I wanna highlight these 3 social justice commitments: that all learning is contextual, education has a central role in emancipation, and systems of power and privilege exist. And so even saying those statements can be a really powerful centering piece for our partnership work, to be able to really set the tone of being able to hear and listen to the difficulties and the challenges, not necessarily jump into all the challenges and be overloaded by the needs and the priorities, but really taking a pause to center social justice so we can come together and really hear one another's stories. And
Rosemary, I'm going to jump in
common stories. Share. Sure.
You aren't actually showing your slides.
Oh, no.
We're hearing the great content, but you referenced the slide, so I wanted to pause so you can do so.
Perfect, please. Thank you, Mindy. And how about now?
We've got it. Thanks, Rosemary.
Perfect. No, wonderful. So I'm just going to do a slight return back to the principles. Again, combining the principles of community engagement, with our social justice commitments. So this is our aspiration, and today our event, moving into our event, is really going to focus on that, really bridging the personal experiences of our partners and our organizations to bring alive the challenges and the collaboration that we really can undertake together. So I'm going to now have a moment to pass it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. We've all had a moment to be able to type into the chat to get a feel for who's in our virtual space. But maybe I could invite Angelus Evans to start, since you're at the top of my list, and then we'll move through to give a brief introductions of yourself, any way that you'd like to share a little bit about yourself, your background, your organization, and we'll move from there. Thanks. And thanks, Mindy, for that heads up.
All right, thank you so much, Rosemary. Hello, everybody. My name is Angelus Evans, pronouns she, her. I have been a resident of Baltimore City for 17 years. I actually had to do the math when you all made that ask of me. I've worked as a prevention-based trainer and advocate for over a decade now in the topic areas of sexual and intimate partner violence, child abuse, and intersectionality. I like to say that I've honed my advocacy skills through coalition building, legislative organizing, and through experiences of leading professional and youth-specific leadership development on the behalf of those who've experienced multi-layered traumas to those who have experienced housing instability. I have a bachelor's degree in social work from Morgan State University. I currently serve, I see my title up there, in the time I guess maybe that you all have had that, I got a promotion. So now I am the Senior Manager of Community Engagement and Training at Turnaround Incorporated, which is an organization whose mission is to educate, advocate for, and empower all people impacted by issues of intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. And the department that I currently oversee serves as messengers of our mission and is community facing and prevention education based. So thank you all for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Angelique McCoy, and I am the Training Institute Manager at House of Ruth, Maryland. I am so excited to be here. Typically, Janice Miller, our Director of Stability Services, comes to these source panels. I was grateful to step in for her, feeling that I really can add some value to this conversation. I am not a native Baltimorean. I'm originally from New York, and I have been in Maryland for 8 years. My family relocated so that we could give our daughters some better opportunities as she was an emerging adult with special needs. So we're excited to be here. I am a seasoned trainer. I have been training for close to 15 years in the professional development space in both for-profit and nonprofit organizations. And I am really excited to have been able to finally begin the journey of merging the passion and the advocacy of my work with my everyday work, which is really awesome. In addition, I'm also a licensed professional counselor, and I serve clients typically in our Baltimore City area. And then I have a plethora of clients in the Harford County area where I reside. I am a minister. I'm an ordained minister. Just a fun fact, I'm also a recorded singer. So when I'm not talking, I'm singing. I have my master's degree and of course, my licensure here in Maryland. And when I am not working my advocacy on the professional side, personally, I serve on the Harford County CCAC committee, which is a special education committee for advisory purposes for parents and families. And I am also one of the board members of an organization called Not Another Child, which is a New York City non-for-profit organization whose mission is to provide wholeness and healing and advocacy to communities and families who have experienced gun violence. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Beth Watkins. I'm the program director at Asili Women Enterprise. I've been in Baltimore for about 5.5 years. Prior to that, I lived in North and East Africa for 6 years. I lived in Sudan, South Sudan, and Egypt, where I was working with forced migrant populations. I have over, for the last little over a decade, I've been working with refugees, asylum seekers, foreign-born trafficking survivors, and other forced migrants. So I work at Asili Women Enterprise. We're a small nonprofit Northeast Baltimore. We work with asylum seekers and foreign-born trafficking survivors, helping them navigate the immigration legal process, heal from past trauma, and rebuild their lives in Maryland. And we have a wraparound or holistic service model. I've been at AWE for just over 2.5 years, going on 3 years. And I have my master's in refugee protection and forced migration studies. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for all the background. I think we're gonna have a really great conversation today. So my first question to the panelists is on a personal level, what does social justice mean to me? And then you can move that into, how does it, what does it mean to your organization collectively and your staff? And so Beth, I'm going to start with you, go in the reverse direction. So what does it mean to you personally and to your organization?
Yeah, so I think social justice, I think for me is a lot about seeking a world where marginalized populations and historically marginalized populations have the support, opportunities, rights to live with dignity, safety, and working to break down the fundamentally unjust systems that currently exist, and with the recognition that's really incumbent on those, especially with privileges, to be breaking down those fundamentally unjust systems. And I think for my organization, it's really similar. We're working on strategic action planning right now, so we're talking about a lot of these values, and I think it would align pretty similarly. And I would just add that for AWE, I think we specify that we try to do those things through solidarity, community, dignity, and a holistic approach as our core values to seek that social justice for our clients and the population that we work with.
I think it's back to me. I'm in the middle here. For me, echoing everything Beth said and just maybe adding a few layers, it's really about the equity of it all, not just the equality of it all, which we know just being equal is not necessarily being fair. And so the importance of making sure that when we are looking at social justice, that not only are we looking at the services that we provide, are they equitable? Are we ensuring that all populations who deserve and who seek services are actually receiving the services at the level of which they should? I think it's also a really big aspect of really knocking down the walls of social injustice and really breaking down all of the bricks that have been built up with racial inequality, and being an advocate, not just an ally. I have a colleague who often says that our work really wraps us from helping people to grow as allies into advocates. An ally is going to stand with, an ally is going to say, I agree, an ally is going to plan all the hashtags and run all the social media programs, but an advocate is going to get out there and do something to advocate for change. And so I think that's really what we want to really focus on when thinking about social justice.
Certainly echoing the points that have been made thus far. I think the first thing, just in reading it initially, I just thought fairness, which I know personally has if I think back and just like growing up has just kind of always been a personal drive of mine. So finding work where the pursuit is to make things equitable, to make things equal for folks, and to shine a light on spaces and groups that aren't getting those same type of justices. But it also just means for me, putting all, like making sure that all identity groups have the same rights, that they have the same access to resources, that they have the same opportunities. At the same time, I think this was mentioned a little bit too, acknowledging the historical inequalities that they exist, and that in order to even pursue social justice, that we also have to be addressing and rectifying specific measures around advocacy and confronting dynamics of discrimination and oppression, with the recognition that this process has to be, I believe Beth said this to some degree, collaborative as well as inclusive of differences, and affirming to people who are taking part in that. I think the way that this very much plays with turnaround, our clientele is mostly folks who are identifying as women, mostly folks who are identifying not only as women, but women of color. So it has to be threaded in our work. And I think that we do this in a number of ways, because the work can be complicated by things such as like social status and public policy, and the ways that we even organize around anti-trafficking work. So we try to approach this in the way that we staff, whether it be taking into considerations like people's work histories and experiences, making sure that through our leadership that is looking diverse, and across our staff, that we are constantly in training, and we are incorporating, I know this is kind of like another question, but incorporating the perspective of the survivor as well to really inform the decision-making that we make as an agency. So that's what, that will kind of be my gist of how I think it shows up with the work and my personal thoughts around it, around social justice.
Thank you. I think we really get, through your responses, really saw the intersections between the personal and then into the collective work, and what helps inform the work and that your organizations are trying to meet the challenges there. I wonder, and anyone can start with this question. My next question is a three-parter. It's as complicated as social justice is, and layered, but you can start in any realm. If you can think about a highlight, a recent moment of joy or success, a low light, the ongoing challenge of doing the work that your organizations do, and or an insight. So maybe, is there an innovative approach that you are, most proud about having been part of, that your organization that really shapes your perspectives and influences sort of the outcomes and how you're trying to move the needle towards justice and gender justice in your work? So is the highlight, a low light, and an insight?
I'd love to jump in while I have all of those questions fresh in my mind. I think I'm actually going to start with a highlight as it pertains to this work and empowering this particular area. We have a storytellers program, and it is one that we are significantly proud of. It is I want to say right now it's 100%. It started off with maybe 50% led by an administrator within the organization, and then 50% led by the peers. And in this instance, the peers are the storytellers. And so now, under our leadership, this program is now 100% peer led by 2 peer facilitators. So these are survivors who have gone through the curriculum, who have been able to craft their story in a way that turns them into public speakers and cultivates the art of storytelling. And they spend 8 to 10 weeks in this program. They graduate, per se, where they give an initial performance, per se, of their story in front of their safest crowd, friends, family that they deemed safe, and as well as the staff that worked with them. And from there, they move on to a more deeper professional development where we help them become professional speakers. And then they are able to go out and share their story however they see fit, but also as representatives of House of Ruth Maryland. And it's such a highlight and such a successful moment when you see a survivor telling their story amongst folks who sometimes don't want to hear the reality of what they've gone through, who sometimes are not ready to experience the levels of pain and trauma that they have gone through as a survivor of intimate partner violence, and to watch them stand flat-footed, whether emotional or whether just fully engaged, and share but to the point where at the end, there's always this galvanizing moment where now it's your turn. What can you do so that this doesn't happen to your sister or your mother or your aunt or whomever in your life that you are concerned about? And so that's a really great success for House of Ruth Maryland, because we're really looking at the big picture. We're looking at gender equality, because yes, while anyone can experience intimate partner violence, our mission is definitely continuing to be that we are ending that fight against violence against women and children in their homes so that everyone can be safe. We do realize that all populations, all genders, are experiencing intimate partner violence. And we also understand that if we can work with both the survivors as well as the perpetrators, then we can begin to re-educate, we can begin to change some behaviors. And so seeing the Storytellers program emerge and evolve to what it is now has been such a highlight. At the same time, it's also a low light, because it takes a lot of courage and it takes a full transparency in your journey of healing to be able to be successful in this program. Because we've had survivors come who we felt that it was tough to turn them away, because we didn't want to re-traumatize them by having to continuously live through a trauma story coupled with those in your cohort and not be ready for that. So it's a low light when you have to think about the reality is this person ready for this part of their journey? Or do we want to say, let's try it again, the next cohort, and provide some resources that might help them walk through? So the Storytellers program is our highlight and our low light. And then one of the innovative approaches that I'm enjoying right now is our Measuring Success program. Our Measuring Success initiative was grant funded through the governor's office in a way to help us begin as organizations throughout the state of Maryland to understand how we can best measure the success of our programs. If we say that we are moving people towards being able to best meet their basic needs, how are we doing that? If we're moving people towards self-sufficiency in the legal space, being able to assign the responsibility of their abuse back to their abuser and not take it on themselves, how are we doing that? If we're working towards being able to manage trauma symptoms, because the reality is a lot of organizations, we chart our data on the lessening of symptoms, but what's more important is that a person is able to manage them over time. But again, the question remains, how are we charting that? So the Measuring Success initiative is a framework that some folks on this program have helped us with the research, and Dr. Jackie Campbell, and really helping us to understand how we can put together those 10 indicators that we now use to help other organizations throughout Maryland chart their success.
Right. Thank you.
I can go next. So I'll start with the low light. I think that one of the things that we are experiencing, we had a very Turnaround was actually the first organization to provide anti-trafficking services. And one of the ways that when we started the program back in 2011, that was really lucrative as far as experience and connection, was running a drop-in center for our trafficking survivors. Being able to experience those who had experienced something like human trafficking, kind of build community together in a space, was something that was really just pivotal for the agency and really good for, I think, even the language that Angelique used as far as like transferring people into like advocating for themselves and just like building community. Post-COVID though, we have not been able to like get folks into the drop-in center. We have this very beautiful space in our downtown office, and it's just been really hard around issues of re-socialization, being able to have survivor-centered spaces and programming, and actually having people come out and be in the physical. And in that time too, there's been so many transitions. So like connections and stuff to maybe staff and all of that folks have is new now because we have new staffing and different things like that. So that's been just like an ongoing challenge for us. I would say a point of innovation would be maybe I'll use this, yeah, as my, I wanted to use it both as highlights, so maybe I'll use it as that. We, through the community engagement and training program, we've actually been working with a local high school for going on 3 years now, where we've had one designated educator from our organization working with about 7 high school students. This was initially kind of conceived by a climate survey that we did at this school around how power-based violence showed up in this school's community. We had about 400 students who actually took part in this survey, and then we built curricula based off of some of the issues that the students were seeing in their schools. Now we've trained these 7 students to be peer educators around issues of bystander intervention and sexual violence. And throughout this semester, they are now going to be like student facilitators to their peers. We'll be going into like our technical, our second school year with the students, doing that cycle again. And I would say a highlight as an agency was recently that throughout COVID, as a team, we've gotten into policy work at a state level. We're still aiming for more city-based legislation and how we can show up and support there. But our agency, along with a number of other agencies who do similar work than ours, we actually just recently passed this Safe Harbor bill, which is a bill that will no longer incriminate those who've experienced trafficking. We've had experiences where those who have been trafficked have been charged with criminal offenses, again, being involved in something for those, particularly those under age 18, if they've experienced human trafficking. I believe that right now we're just waiting for the governor to sign off on it, but that was a big win, especially on the behalf of our executive director, Amanda Rodriguez, who had been working on it long before she even became the executive director of Turnaround. Oh, we lost Rosemary. I'm sure she'll be back.
I'm here, thank you. Yeah, no, I heard about that just this morning. The executive director was on the radio talking about the advance, so wonderful. And how about you, Beth?
Yeah, so I think just a little like context for those who don't know, sort of most of our asylum seekers and foreign-born trafficking survivors are uninsured and uninsurable. Many of them are here sort of awaiting permanent status. They're in the process, they're waiting to apply for asylum, and then you have to wait to apply for your employment off your work permit. Pretty much when clients enter our doors until we help them through that whole legal process, it's 1.5, 2 years, sometimes longer before they can even legally work. They're not allowed to purchase private insurance. So I think specifically in the realms of health, and we have a slew of services, but I'm thinking health specifically, for our purposes today. I think it's just really challenging for a lot of clients to have healthcare services. And I think one of our I'll start I guess with an insight, sort of one of our more exciting partnerships. And we work really closely with Heal Clinic through a grant we received recently. We're able to partner with them formally, and they provide primary care as well as forensic evaluations for asylum seekers, for survivors of torture. And so being formally linked with them and being able to provide PCP care through them, and also through them another Hopkins partnership we have, RHP, where groups of medical students are paired with one of our clients with additional health needs, who sort of need more help than just our case management team can meet. And these groups of students work with these clients over the course of a year and help them make sure they get their appointments, understand coupons for prescriptions, help them work with TAP and with other things to get their specialist care, and just seeing clients who really are not only navigating an extremely complex healthcare system, that as a person who was born and raised in the US, I find our healthcare system massively complex, and I don't understand it sometimes. So for people who are new to this culture, new to this language, like add in language barriers, all of that, being able to help people meet their healthcare needs, I think is really critical to our services and also our clients' well-being. And so having those formal partnerships and these new programs that we've started in the last year or so to help clients get PCP care, to get glasses, right, to like help them get teeth pulled, is has just been really wonderful. And I think with that, one of our a highlight, I can just share, like, I think just about the client story who's benefited from this partnership. This is a client who is a survivor of torture. They're here seeking asylum. They're separated from their family, have been through really severe trauma. And it's taken a long time for us to cultivate a relationship with this client for those reasons. But through our case management team and some of our partnerships, this client has an upcoming asylum hearing this summer with representation, a really strong case. He was able to do a forensic evaluation examination with this client, sort of documenting, proving a physical exam, proving that they suffered the torture that they say that they suffered, which really increases their chances of being granted asylum. This client has traumatic brain injuries from the torture that they survived, and so we're able to get them treatment, medication for mental health support and resources, and we were able to provide this client with housing. This client isn't allowed to work yet, has a really limited diet because of health reasons. We're able to get them the food that they need through our food pantry and through some of our partnerships. And we've just been able to see this client sort of start to come alive, and still a long road ahead. But just like through, like having these holistic services in place we've been trying to build the last couple of years has just been really incredible to see. It's one of those moments where you like the conversations I have with this client now versus 4 or 5 months ago, just that the whole demeanor has changed. And you're like, this is why we do this work. So it's just been a highlight for me personally recently. It's just sort of like through this really hard work we do, seeing these partnerships met, especially as we come up against these sort of unjust systems that are fundamentally built to keep lots of people out. But the clients that we work with in particular in my work. I think a low light and ongoing challenge. Yeah, I mean, there are probably some. I think Angelisa was nodding along when you were talking about sort of rebuilding a culture of in-person services at your office. When the pandemic started, 3 years ago, I came on a few months into the pandemic. We were a staff of 4 or 5. I think I'm one of 2 remaining staff who came on during that time. We've since grown. We have 17 staff. We've had an executive director change. And we've also, a lot of those clients sort of completely cycled out. So we've been starting fresh. So with our day program and in-person appointments and things, I think we're sort of starting to see that grow. But we reopened for in-person services last summer, and it was a big challenge rebuilding that. We had a lot of conversations around it, and it's happening. But it's been really hard, I think, for us and for other places as well, to sort of rebuild things that you had in place, especially things like in-person community, sort of peer support and those sorts of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Yeah, I think so many areas of just like how we're building even relationships today through our virtual spaces, but then also, resensitizing ourselves to being in person and building the relationships that way. I want to take the moment to turn it over to our audience. Our panelists have shared a lot of wonderful snapshots of the work that they do. And I'm wondering, where is this falling for our audience members, and to come into full participation and to give them some feedback and questions about anything that maybe struck you all. So feel free to come on out if you feel comfortable to come into view. I know that our panelists would love to see some faces if possible, and also just hear your reactions to some of their experiences and how it might connect with something that you all have been experiencing and thinking about as well, as it relates to gender and health equity in Baltimore.
Hi, I'm DJ. I work with Source Service Scholars with Rosemary. I had a question more about how it all kind of started for y'all, like more of your history. I want to know like a specific opportunity you were given that shaped and contributed to your identity and the work you do right now.
I can start. So I personally always knew I wanted to go. I didn't know I wanted to do social work or anything like that, but I knew I wanted to work with people, but I was very particular about the capacity of which I could best support people. So finding community work was really wonderful because it wasn't direct service, and I knew that I wouldn't show up the best in that way. Essentially, the opportunity, that's what really struck me about your question. It was interesting. It was really like the universe was just aligned, where my former boss and the former director of this department was a Morgan alum and was speaking at she was one of the first people I saw speak as a freshman doing trainings that we would do out of the department that I run now. And then she was looking for an intern. So I became an intern and essentially was offered a role like the same 2 weeks before graduating, became an educator of the department that I now oversee. And I worked at Turnaround for 5 years post undergrad. I went off and got into like legislative work for about 4 years. And then I came back during the pandemic under the leadership of the same person who created that opportunity before for me. And she transitioned out, and then I took over the department. I will say though that issues of violence was threaded through my like personal upbringing. I identify as like a secondary survivor of intimate partner violence, which that terminology means that I was a child in a home where there was intimate partner violence regularly occurring. And to be quite honest, particularly as it pertains to a little bit of what we're talking about today, is that I don't even think that I necessarily, as a child exposed to intimate partner violence, I never even had the language of what was actually happening in my home until I first got a content packet working as an educator at Turnaround. So automatically for me, it brought up in me like, why hadn't I ever seen this type of stuff or had conversations like this prior to age 22 years of age? And then as I started to deliver the content, we had like set curriculars and stuff like that. One of the first things that I recognize as a disparity is that oftentimes the prevention content was not culturally relevant to the spaces that we were going into. So primarily we service as an agency, we provide free services to Baltimore City and Baltimore County. We've extended to Howard County as well. But a lot of the clientele that we serve in our direct service and at the community level of like our prevention education service are primarily people of color. So that was like kind of the connections for me. And then as time has gone on, themes of like social justice, equitable like resources and all of that are just so much threaded to the work that we do. So a lot of different points for me, but everything saying that this is where I'm supposed to be and this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I think so for sure.
I can jump in, and definitely, again, I can echo Angela's in so many aspects. It really boils down to, especially while you're still in school and you are at the point in your adulthood where you are figuring out who I'm going to be in the world and what space I'm going to hold. For me, it was that opportunity to really answer that question. And often that's, how can my purpose become how I present myself in my professional life? How can I marry the two? I'm sure you've all heard the saying, if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. And if your purpose becomes what you are doing in your professional career, it doesn't feel like work. I too, from New York, again, an urban community. And for me, it was all about breaking generational curses. Like I grew up with friends who could tell the same stories of their parents, and then those same stories of negative issues mirrored in their grandparents. And we could trace it all the way back as far as the roots could go. And I didn't want to continue that as an adult. I didn't want to carry the baggage of all of my family's history. And not only that, I didn't want to continue to be the only person that looked like me in certain spaces. Just to share really quickly, my mother was someone, and my parents were both someone who wanted me to, of course, as all parents, to do better than they did. So they saved up, they got scholarships, they got welfare, whatever they needed in order to get me to the places that they couldn't themselves go. So private school from a very young age, being the one of maybe one or two other people of color in a classroom space. And this was all throughout my life, even the jobs that I chose. And after a while, you start to look around and say, I need to open the door for others. I need to make spaces available with what is happening in this world, thinking more again about equity. It's not just fair for just me to be able to be in this space, but I want to bring everybody through. And so thinking about my purpose, my faith walk was a big part of it. Who am I supposed to be in this world? What contribution am I supposed to leave? And so thinking about what that looks like in my professional life was really what got me to where I am today. That's a great question, DJ. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think two things I knew from when I was very young is that I wanted to help people, and I also wanted to travel. I grew up in a really small town, I guess, and I guess wanted to like get out as soon as I could. So after college, I moved overseas, and I knew I wanted to sort of help. And through my first couple of years overseas, I was working with forced migrant populations, people who were displaced because of war and other reasons. I ended up in a war zone for a little while. I was forced to leave 2 different countries for one because war broke out, and for another reason as well. And I loved it. I loved the work I was doing. I loved living overseas. I learned to speak Sudanese Arabic, and then for health reasons, I had to move back to the U.S. and I was just really very grumpy about it. But I knew that this was the work I wanted to do, and so I had just having the tremendous privilege to live overseas, to have those opportunities. I knew I wanted to come back to my home country and really advocate for the fact that asylum is a human right, and that everyone really deserves to be here. And that we're the U.S. is signatories to the 1951 Refugee Declaration, and we agreed as a country in 1951 that we would provide protection to people who are fleeing for their lives. Even with these protections in place and accepting, people who are seeking asylum, however begrudgingly as a country we do at times, I think recognizing as well that the hurdles that are here for people to work, to get legal status, to have enough to eat, to have medical care, the hurdles are massive. And I think I was not even Angelia sort of said, this is kind of one step at a time. She ended up in the work that she's in, but also this is exactly where she's supposed to be. I think I'm just every day I'm really grateful I get to do this work. And it's also it's the only thing I want to do. And I didn't start out at 18 being I want to work in Baltimore with asylum seekers, but every sort of step has brought me here, and I'm really grateful for it. And I'm just really 5-year-old me, 15-year-old me, 22-year-old me would just be really grateful for what I'm doing. And I'm just really grateful for the steps that led me here. And I get to help people, and through my day-to-day life, I still get to experience the world, even though I'm living in my country of origin right now. So it's a great question.
Thank you guys for answering. I appreciate you guys for being so vulnerable and actually sharing the history of and the path that brought you guys to where you are. I actually wanted that answer. So thanks for digging deep.
Any other audience members? Yep, please, Julia.
Hi, I'm Julia Vandermarl. Thank you all for speaking today. I just wanted to ask, because all 3 of you work very closely with people who have experienced trauma, and also, tied to the theme of the panel, are face to face almost every day with the disparities in our world. And I know oftentimes, at least for me, it can become very easy to sort of lose hope or feel discouraged because of what you see. So how do you guys, keep hope about what you're doing, about the world around you? And I guess also within your work, is it fulfilling to help? That's a strange question, but is it fulfilling to help others? And how do you sort of see your place in helping them?
I guess we could do the same round again. So I just want to note that Julia is one of those 7 students that I mentioned from Park School. Julia is actually with us doing her senior project. So she's interning with us for 6 weeks, and she's been wonderful. Day 3, she was a rock star in particular yesterday. But yeah, I would say, Julia, as far as just the earlier part of your question, I would say that Angelique has mentioned her spirituality. Spirituality, it's just my anchor. right? Like, so that can mean different things for different folks, but it very much is my anchor. Again, going back to my experience in school, one of my first social work classes, my professor said to me, find your corner and do what you can. I am a person where I am totally fine with being in a space of feeling like I did my best. And that is all that I can continue to do every single day. I think that it's important to really value this work. And as we shared in the last question, there's a lot of personal connection to it, but I do not ever come into the office any day thinking that this is about me. Right. I was also raised under this perspective of serving, like starting to volunteer at age seven. So I very much feel that it is connected to my spirituality and connected to me as a person, that I am here to serve and put people in a position to really find their own ways of how they want to heal, how they want to use their voices, how they want to organize. And I just want to be a vessel of saying that this is possible for you, and wherever you want that to look like, you can make it look like that, right? And honestly, as heavy as this work is, I think you've seen this already, Julia. I joke a lot. I keep it light. I when it's time for me to disconnect from this work, I disconnect. Beth mentioned traveling. I haven't done that a lot with work, but I do that a lot personally, like getting out of this setting. Like, I've been a resident of Baltimore City for 17 years. And I think a lot of my reason of being able to experience the city in a way that is very beautiful and has afforded me a lot of opportunities. And I've been able to work with other people to help them create opportunities for themselves too. But the change of setting has been vital in my being able to commit myself to this community and the capacity that I believe that I have, whether it's through work or whether that is as a resident and someone who likes to connect with their community outside of their work as well. I'm also very fortunate, and I know through our work that there are many people walking around who are not loved and haven't been properly shown that in the way that feels good and that perpetuates them to different levels in their lives. And I am very fortunate to have a wonderful group of like family and friends that are traumatically flawed, but they are my village. They are, again, along with my spirituality, they are my anchor. And that is really how I keep the balance, keep it light, step away, properly disconnect. Not that I don't, fumble, because you've also seen that already, Julia, but that's how I try to keep it, at least.
I love how Angelise is starting these rounds off, because you can literally just grab on to her coattail and totally agree. Some of those main themes that she brought out are exactly what I would have brought out. Disconnecting. And this is something that, as I have grown in age, not even in just stature, but in age, have learned the true value in disconnecting. And whether it's traveling, whether it's just sitting on a deck for 20 minutes, reading a book, anything of those natures, and that social support system, whether it's your family, your friends, that is also a big aspect to lifting you up when you're doing this work. And then spirituality or your faith, whatever your journey looks like, those things are really important in order to help you do this. Because one of the things that I personally have always felt, and I don't know if it's from my upbringing, but I always feel that whenever you or any person steps into a social services / human services / helping profession, you're doing that because there's something inside of you that either wants to help others or was not helped and wants to show people the right way. There's usually those two sides. And so figuring out, once you figure out where you are in that spectrum, giving it your all, giving it your heart, giving it your soul. This work is hard. There will be days when you take it home. And that's when you multiply your social circle. That's when you multiply your stepping away, and definitely keeping it light. The folks in this hallway will tell you that when we have a win, I moonwalk down the hallway. And when we don't, I go into my director's office, I sit down and I pour out. So having a safe space to celebrate, but also having that safe space to decompress.
Yeah, I echo everything Angelique and Angelise said. A lot of wisdom there from both of you. And I think, the first thing that came to mind for me was like using your paid time off and being able to switch off. I in the pandemic, boundaries got blurred, and early in my career, I did end up a little bit burned out while I was living overseas, and it's really hard to come back from, and I don't want to do it again. So I use my paid time off, and I switch off. And sometimes there are seasons where it's harder to do than others, and sometimes you don't always do it perfectly, but always making sure that's something I want to get back to, and having a director and a supervisor who really encourages that is essential, and I encourage that for my team as well. I liked what Angela said as well. Sort of, I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but something about like, I can do what I can do. And I think that's something, again, that sort of come with age and with experience, and recognizing like, I cannot break down, like the barriers for my clients in Baltimore and in Maryland and in the United States and at the border. I can't do it, but I'm doing my best. I can do what I can do. And I also sort of, at the end of the day, like I get to live out my ethics and my values and my vocation, like the core basis of like what I believe and what I care about, like I get to do vocationally, which is like just really amazing. And not a lot of people get to do that. So I think that's something I get to hold on to as well. It's like, it's actually like, I'm so freaking lucky to do this work. And I'm really grateful for that. And I think also sense of humor. Yeah, I think I completely agree. And like, just like being able to laugh. And I think direct contact with clients, I don't have as much now as I did in the first several years of my career, but making sure I sort of like stop to talk with clients and chat with them. And while, I see a lot of their barriers are also successes, and those are just moments really worth holding on to. And I think like those little moments, I think, can carry you for a while. I think we get the barriers every day, but like whenever you like count a success, your clients celebrate with you, like being able to have, clients celebrate their wins with me. And just, I think not breaking your work home and sort of taking your time off, you get time to sort of have that perspective and sit back and be like, oh yeah, like this is a dream come true. Like, oh yeah, so-and-so is like thriving now and they weren't a year ago. And so I think, yeah, everything, Angelique and Angelique said as well.
All right, thank you, everyone. That's really helpful to hear.
All right. Is there any other comments or feedback from the audience around anything that you heard today? Just filled with a lot of gratitude for how the conversation went. I know that sometimes when we hear the word panel, it feels can feel a little stuffy sometimes when you're on a panel. But I love again, as DJ mentioned, the vulnerability and just being really honest with our audience around the kind of resolve and resiliency that's needed in doing justice work here in Baltimore. Yeah, I just folks, I'm gonna give a round of applause to our gratitude to our panelists. Thank you. I think it's a real learning experience when we kind of open up some spaces and to pause. So I hope this was a healthy pause for you all. You talked about self-care and also collective care. So I hope that this can be we can continue to have our partner panels and invite our partners and our JHU affiliates to kind of really hear and again, humanize the work, because we can all get stuck in the nuts and bolts and the checklists and everything like that. And so I loved being able to hear a really heartful conversation. And so I want to thank each of our panelists today for doing that. I also want to end today, and I am going to put the slide on the screen to talk a little bit about, we talk a lot about social justice and our service learning aspirations and ways to work towards social change. And, kind of in a very back in the academic sense, how do we use our individual and collective agency to transform unjust and inequitable systems? So that's the academic question. I think we talked about it really in a beautiful personal level. And our team here is starting to develop our social justice toolkit for our medicine, nursing, public health students and staff and faculty. And so if folks have a time, you'll get this if you registered, and folks in the room, take a peek at our reflection toolkit and give us some feedback on it. We're really challenging folks to stretch their muscle for reflexive work so we can really maintain our resolve and our focus. And so, this is these resource toolkits, again, to help us exercise the ability to think about our positionality, think about our intersecting identities, that where we experience advantage and disadvantage. And then how does that shape how we look at the world, so that we can know where we can activate ourselves and stay motivated to work towards justice. So I'm going to leave this up and for folks to be able to link on the QR codes to give us a peek. We would love to gather more feedback. We're really jumpstarting our social justice work with SOURCE and our partners, and want to do it in a way that honors the experiences of our partners and their clients. So this is a beautiful first step. So thank you again to Angela, Beth, and Angelique, and hope everyone has a beautiful Thursday. Thanks again.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
So everybody take care.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. This is great.
Bye. We're not saying on,